I was inside this system for years. I thought the problem was me. It wasn't. Here's what I mean. 5 institutions: the tax code, the housing market, the banking system, the Federal Reserve, and your employer each made an independent decision about how to make money. They never talked to each other. Chase didn't call your landlord. The IRS didn't text the Fed. Nobody sat in a room and planned this. But they each arrived at the same conclusion. You, right where you are, earning somewhere between 40 and 80 grand a year, is the most profitable version of you there is. That's not a conspiracy. That's a convergence. And I'm going to show you the math that proves it. Before we get into the 5 systems, hold one number. One system, 1 year. $160 billion. That is the credit card interest the banking industry collected from American consumers in 2024. $160 billion from people who didn't have enough money. The system literally charges you for being short and then uses your interest payments to fund the returns that shareholders collect on the other end. That's System 3. We'll get there. First, how we ended up here. The American dream is still being sold as a current event. It isn't. It's a historical one. From 1945 to 1979, the deal actually worked. Median wages grew roughly 2% a year. Productivity went up. Wages went with it. The math tracked. The promise was real. Then 1979 happened. Union membership started collapsing from 24.1% of the workforce down to 10% today. The tax code started shifting. The rules changed in ways that took decades to show up in the data. But here's what the data showed. Post 1979, wages grew about 0.5% a year for the bottom 90%. Productivity kept climbing. The gap between what workers produce and what they're paid has been widening for 45 straight years. You want one number that makes this visceral? The bottom 90% of earners got 44% wage growth between 1979 and 2023. 44% over 44 years. The top 1%, 182%. Same country, same economy, same 44 years. That's not 2 different levels of hustle. That's 2 different sets of rules. Now, people do escape. Self-made millionaires exist. But the question isn't whether escape is possible. The question is why. After 45 years of the same formula being available to everyone, the ratio stays roughly stable. The exits exist. They're just not where the branding says they are. And here's what I want you to notice before we run the math. You probably already know something is wrong. You felt it. Maybe it's the rent. Maybe it's the credit card you can't quite knock down. Maybe it's the savings account that still doesn't feel like enough. You've been diagnosing individual symptoms. What this video does is show you they're the same illness. Let me run it on you. $55,000 a year, gross, full-time, doing everything the playbook says to do. Let's see what happens to this money. System 1 is the tax code. On 55 grand in wages, your federal income tax in 2025 is $4,472. Add FICA, that's Social Security and Medicare, 6.2 plus 1.45%, and you're at $4,208 more. Combined federal burden, $8,679. Effective rate, just under 16%. Now, take the same $55,000, but instead of wages, it's long-term capital gains. Money you made from owning something that went up in value. Federal tax on that, 0. Not reduced, not discounted, 0. Because after the standard deduction, your taxable income is under $48,350, and the IRS taxes long-term capital gains at 0% below that line. No FICA either. The delta is $8,679. You pay $8,679 more because you earned the money instead of owned, something that earned it for you. That's not a rounding error. That's almost 9 grand. The tax code was written and maintained by people whose income comes from capital, not wages, capital. The code taxes labor at nearly 16% and taxes ownership at 0. You are the labor, they are the ownership. That's not politics. Those are 2 numbers and a delta. Draw your own conclusions. After System 1, on your 55,000, you've got roughly 46,320 left. System 2 is housing, and it's the clearest proof that the same asset can sit on completely opposite sides of the ledger depending on who you are. Take a house. One house. For the person who owns it, Equity accumulates every month. Appreciation compounds. They're using the bank's money through leverage, and the interest is tax deductible. The asset works for them in four directions simultaneously. For the person renting that same house, 32.8% of their income leaves every month and builds zero equity. Not some equity, zero. The price goes up, and it costs them more next year. Two people, same asset, completely opposite financial outcomes. At the median, on a $55,000 income, 32.8% is $18,040 a year in rent, 18 grand. Every dollar paying down someone else's mortgage, every dollar growing someone else's balance sheet. And look, I've been there, signing a lease knowing exactly what I'm describing. You sign it anyway, because what else do you do? And it's getting worse, not better. Back in the 70s, about a quarter of renters were cost-burdened. Today, it's half. Roughly half of all renters now spend more than 30% of their income on housing, what economists call cost-burdened, which is a polished way of saying the housing system is running at full extraction. After rent, on your $55,000, you've got roughly $28,280 left. System 3. You borrow at 22.3%. You save at 0.42%. Actually, let me back up. The number first, then the name. That spread isn't a market rate. That's a designed gap. And look, I know those numbers sound abstract. Let me make it concrete. Say you've got around 5 grand on a credit card below the current national average, but a common working balance. At 22.3% APR, that costs you $1,115 a year in interest, just sitting there. Now take that same $5,000 in a standard savings account at 0.42%. You earn $21 a year on that. Net cost of that asymmetry, just over $1,000 annually. The extraction generates the shortfall that generates more extraction. Chase, Capital One, Citi, Bank of America. They collected collectively $160 billion in credit card interest in 2024. From people who didn't have enough cash to cover the gap between their income and their expenses, the banking system profits from the gap, and the other four systems help create the gap. Add 1,094 to the running total. System 4 is quieter, but it works on you every year, whether you notice or not. Inflation in 2025 is running around 2.7%. Your savings account earns 0.42. Real return on your cash, negative 2.28% per year. On 10 grand sitting in savings, that's 228 in purchasing power gone annually. Invisible. Doesn't show up on a statement, you didn't get a bill, the money just buys less. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 is up roughly tenfold from its crisis low in 2009. After 2008, the Federal Reserve expanded its balance sheet to $4.5 trillion in assets. After 2020, another $4 trillion. When the Fed buys at that scale, asset prices inflate. The people who held assets collected that return. The people who held cash, which is the default behavior of the middle class, because cash feels responsible, lost purchasing power every single year. That's not conspiracy. That's just what the policy did and who it helped. Add 228 to the running total. System 5 doesn't show up in a line item. That's what makes it the most insidious one. Your healthcare is tied to your job. That's not a law of nature. It's an American structural choice that almost no other developed country made. Your share of the premium alone, $1,440 a year just to have the coverage. And it creates job lock, the inability to leave, to negotiate aggressively, to take a risk because doing any of those things means losing coverage for your family. The proof in dollar terms, workers who can negotiate collectively earn $11,960 more per year than those who can't, not because they're smarter, because they can walk. Union membership in 1,979, 24.1%. Today, 10%. The negotiating floor was removed from 14 out of every 15 private sector workers. The chain isn't the cost, the chain is the leverage. And here's the part that should make you genuinely angry. The behaviors the middle-class playbook calls responsible are precisely the behaviors that maximize extraction. Keep your cash liquid in a savings account. System 4 takes it. Stay in your job and don't rock the boat. System 5 keeps the ceiling low. Pay your credit card minimum and stay current. System 3 runs at full yield. The playbook was written by the people who benefit from you following it. Remember, none of these institutions coordinated. Chase didn't call the IRS, your landlord didn't call the Fed. Each one just needed you exactly where you are. No meeting required. The convergence is the architecture. Now let me add this up, just for fun. System 1 took $8,679 in tax extraction. System 2 took $18,040 in rent, every dollar of it building someone else's equity. System 3 cost $1,094 in interest asymmetry, borrowing at 22% while your savings earned almost nothing. System 5 pulled $1,440 just to keep your healthcare attached to a job you can't afford to leave. And System 4 quietly erased $228 in purchasing power from cash you thought was sitting safe. Added up, $29,481. On $55,000 gross, more than 50 cents of every dollar flows through systems that extract it, most of it building wealth for someone else, your landlord's equity, the bank's interest income. Asset owners who got the quantitative easing dividend. The shareholders of Chase and Capital One. That's not your financial plan failing. That's the design working. After the extraction loop, the $55,000 earner has roughly $25,500 to actually live on. The other $29,000 didn't disappear. It transferred. But here's where I have to stop you, because the most dangerous thing this video can do is leave you right there. I know what you're thinking. If the design is this tight, why bother? If 5 independent systems each have their thumb on the scale, what's the point of any of it? That's the trap inside the trap. And I'm going to be specific about why it's wrong. The design has gaps. Not metaphorical gaps, mathematical ones. Index investing is a direct opt-out of System 4. Instead of your money sitting at 0.42 and losing to inflation, it participates in the same asset appreciation that the quantitative easing dividend produced. The S&P 500 has returned an average of 8% annually over the long-term conservative number. The wealth-building mechanism that worked for asset owners since 2009 is available to you in an index fund for the cost of opening a brokerage account. Tax-advantaged accounts, your 401k, your Roth IRA, are where System 1's asymmetry reverses. Inside a Roth IRA, your investment gains are taxed at 0%. The IRS built a gap in their own code. It's called retirement accounts. They left it open. Here's the hope math. Straight. $200 a month redirected from the extraction loop into an index fund at 8%, $36,589 at 10 years, $117,804 at 20 years, $298,000 at 30, $200 a month, 30 years, nearly $300,000. The compound math that worked against you in the extraction loop, the bank's interest compounding on your balance, the landlord's equity compounding on your rent, that same mechanic works for you in an index fund. Same math, different side of the ledger. The gap between the version of you who sees this loop and the version who doesn't is 6 figures over a working lifetime. That's not motivation. That's arithmetic. The exploit the system didn't close is knowing how it works. Probably because they assumed most people wouldn't go looking. Most people don't, but you're here. So here's where the exits actually are. The smallest gap in the design and the easiest to exploit, your savings account. National average APY right now is 0.42%. Top high-yield savings accounts are paying 4% and above. On $10,000, that's $42 a year versus $400. $358 recovered in a 15-minute account opening. FDIC insured, zero risk. That's the floor move. Do it this week. The one that changes the most over time. Open a retirement account and put something in it, even $50 a month. Inside a Roth IRA, gains taxed at 0. $50 a month at 8% over 30 years is $75,000. $200 a month is $300,000. The clock starts the day you open the account, not the day you have a lot to put in. Open it, start the clock. The hardest gap to close, but the biggest one, your rent-to-income ratio. Monthly rent divided by monthly gross income. If that number is above 30%, System 2 is running at full extraction. I'm not going to tell you to just move. I know that's not how it works. But knowing the number starts the clock. Geographic arbitrage. A roommate for 18 months while you build a buffer. I know. not glamorous. But the math doesn't care about glamorous. An income increase that rebalances the ratio. Awareness is step one. Most people skip step one. Audit your cash. Emergency fund 3 to 6 months of expenses belongs in a high-yield account, not a standard savings account. That money should be earning 4% too. Everything above it sitting at 0.42 is a voluntary donation to System 4. On 20 grand above the emergency fund, that's $716 a year. You're leaving on the table for the convenience of doing nothing. Move it. Seriously. 15 minutes. I know you're going to open 3 other tabs first. Open this one. The last one isn't an account to open. It's a posture shift. Your employer knows the healthcare chain is leveraged roughly 12 grand a year in the gap between workers who can negotiate collectively and workers who can't. You probably can't fix that today, but you can start building toward a position where you have alternatives, even if you never use them. The most expensive belief you can hold is, I'm trapped here. Not because it leads to bad decisions, because it prevents them entirely. There's a full episode in this series on exactly how to execute the HYSA and index fund moves, specific accounts, specific mechanics, what order to do it in. I'll link it when it's out. Start with the savings account. That one has no barriers. I ran this loop for years before I saw it. I thought I was behind because I wasn't disciplined enough. The system is very good at making you think that. The American Dream narrative is specifically designed to redirect structural failure into personal fault, because as long as you're blaming yourself, you're not looking at the architecture. The $55,000 earner isn't behind because he lacks discipline. He's behind because he's running a loop that was built before he arrived. The 5 systems didn't need to coordinate. They just each needed him broke. The American Dream worked until 1979. Since then, it's been the branding on a system that extracts from the people still believing it's current. Seeing the loop is the exit. The gaps I just showed you are real. The math works in both directions. You cannot beat a game you don't know you're playing. Now you know.